Hello everybody, how are you doing? My name is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and welcome back. So with just a couple of days to go until Mario Odyssey finally graces our lives and our Nintendo Switches with its presence, I thought it would be fun to discuss the game one more time while we still have time to be excited about it and anticipate it and not really know all of the different things that we need to and want to know about the game. But don't worry, there are no spoilers in this video for Mario Odyssey. Everyone's freaking out about spoilers. Apparently, leaks and spoilers are all over the place, all over the internet, and YouTube and Twitter and all of these places about Super Mario Odyssey. And even the footage you're watching in the corner here right behind me, that footage is only from Nintendo's Treehouse back during E3, so it's all stuff that Nintendo has officially decided to show us. No spoilers, all of that good stuff. I even discussed, I did my second live stream last night, and some people were talking about all the spoilers and everything that they've seen. And I feel like it's such a weird thing for Mario's spoilers to exist that I was confused as to A, how do you spoil Mario? Because really Mario games aren't developed in a way that really allow for spoilers. And B, why are people watching videos and watching things that would contain spoilers, especially because it's been such big news that they're out there? Why isn't everyone just not pressing play on Super Mario Odyssey videos? But regardless, I guess they're kind of being hidden and treated as surprises and whatnot. And so anyway, the point is, no spoilers in this. We're just going to discuss some Odyssey. So the big question I'm asking today is if Super Mario Odyssey will be the definitive Nintendo Switch title. Will it be the title that truly, in this first year, defines the console? And is, obviously, it's going to be one of quite a few must-play games that already exist. And it's obviously going to be a huge seller. We know the reviews are going to be through the roof. A couple of the things that have started to show up on the review side of things have looked really good. We know Edge gave it a 10. I believe Famitsu gave it a 38 out of 40. So things are looking good in that front. But when we talk about a title being a definitive title, I think there's some different characteristics that go into that. More than anything, it is, if you look at the root word of definitive, and that is define, to be the definition of. And if a title is a definitive title for a console, what does that mean? Well, to me, a definitive title really consists of two major qualities. One is that it is a reason to buy the hardware that it's available on. And there are always a lot of titles throughout the life cycle of any console that has that quality. But I do think it's one of the ones that makes it a definitive title. Something that really says, hey, does this console or hardware or handheld cost $200, $300, $400, $500, whatever the case may be in some instances? Well, if it does, but you also want to play this game, it's worth it for you to drop $300 to $500 on the hardware so you can play this game, because this game is truly that good. The other main quality to me, and again, there are more than just these two sort of characteristics, but I'm just touching mostly on these two. The other one is a title that truly takes advantage of all of the best qualities and abilities and features and functions of a hardware possible. And I definitely think that Mario Odyssey has that as well, because we're looking at a game that is beautiful, going to be one of, if not maybe the very best looking game on the console as of right now. So we know whatever power and graphical capabilities Nintendo has been able to squeeze into the Nintendo Switch, we know is going to be on full display when it comes to Super Mario Odyssey, which is crazy exciting. Mario games are always beautiful, and they've always been pushing the boundaries of visuals on all of their consoles. Super Mario 64, obviously industry-defining in terms of its graphics at that time for the launch of the 64. Sunshine, one of the best-looking games on the GameCube. The way it had the ink sort of paint effect floating around the world. That was really cool stuff, and the water effects were things that we had never seen at that time. Obviously, Galaxy was incredible. That game literally was the closest we had to an HD 360 quality game running in standard definition on the Wii, if that makes sense. I mean, it looked good enough to be a 360 or a PS3 game with all of the different effects and visuals in that game. It just had to run in standard definition because it was on the Wii, which was unfortunate. 3D World, obviously Pixar quality style graphics, and that is definitely one of the best looking and most impressive games on the Wii U. And then, of course, Super Mario Odyssey, we know is going to be the same thing. So just in terms of the power of the Switch, that will be on full display with Super Mario Odyssey, which is really fantastic. But also, it is the Joy-Cons, which I talked about in my last Mario video. The fact that a lot of the features and functions and the motion capability of the Joy-Cons and the benefits of playing with your hands separated as opposed to stuck together like with most regular controllers, that is also a huge part of the Odyssey experience and something that Nintendo is really big into. Like, this is how you throw Cappy and do a couple of other things, and you're doing flips and wahoos and all these crazy things. And we know it's going to work well. I've yet to play a demo, but demos have been available for a while at different conventions and at Best Buys, and everyone is saying that the Cappy stuff and the motion controls work really well. And that's a huge component. The Joy-Cons are a massive component to what the Switch hardware is. So when it comes to Super Mario Odyssey, we have a game that definitely justifies the purchase of the hardware it's available on. We have a game absolutely taking the best advantage of the graphics and power and capabilities of the system under the hood. And we have a game that really relies in a lot of ways on the controller unique functions and the ability for motion controls with the Joy-Cons and all of these different things. Now, it's not the only game that does a lot of these things, but I think it's going to be the game that probably does it the best. So does Mario Odyssey become the definitive Nintendo Switch title? I'm tending to think yes. I mean, in my opinion, the only way it could somehow end up not being the definitive title would be if it somehow turns out to be not an amazing game. I mean, even if the game is just pretty good, like, yeah, Odyssey's good. I'd say it's like an 8 out of 10. You know, an 8 out of 10 game is a great game. It's a game that's worth purchasing and playing for pretty much any fan on any console. But it doesn't become that 10 out of 10 masterpiece that becomes that, like I said, definitive title. Something that qualifies as definitive, defining for that console and that hardware. So that would be the one sort of thing if the game ends up getting a Metacritic of like 86. And, you know, even I play it and I'm like, yeah, it's good, but it's not amazing. I feel like that would probably keep it from that definitive title status. But I think we all know that's not going to happen. That's not the Mario way. That's not the Nintendo way. Their games, and the Mario games specifically, are always breaking boundaries and always pushing what we expect from a Mario game and from any kind of video game. That's what Nintendo does specifically with this series, and all indications from Odyssey are that it's doing it again. It's like Nintendo's batting 1,000 here, and I say that as somebody who likes Super Mario Sunshine, by the way. They're batting 1,000, and it's like no matter what you expect and no matter how lofty your goals and your standards are for the next Mario game, Nintendo will meet those expectations and then surmount them. It's just they have that ability in them, and it's so great, and it's so special, and it's remarkably exciting. Now, an interesting conundrum for me is that while I expect Mario Odyssey to be basically a 10 out of 10 for myself, I'm sure everyone will feel that way, but for me, I expect to basically walk away from Odyssey feeling that way. I don't necessarily know that it's still going to be my favorite game on the Switch. I have a hard time believing that I will enjoy Mario Odyssey more than I've enjoyed Breath of the Wild. And again, that's just for me. Every gamer is different. Everyone has subjective opinions and tastes and preferences with games. And we all know how great Breath of the Wild was. I think Breath of the Wild really is one of, if maybe even the best game ever created. Despite it not being my #1 favorite, I think in terms of gamecraft, it's like very likely the #1 or 2 best made game ever. And I certainly loved it almost as much as that. So with Mario Odyssey, I expect something very close, but I don't expect it to be a game that Rob prefers more than Breath of the Wild. So how could I call it a definitive title as opposed to Breath of the Wild? Well, that's the tricky thing here. That's the key thing. Saying a title might be qualified as the definitive title for any one console shouldn't have so much to do about your opinion or your preference. My preference of Breath of the Wild, if that holds true, won't have anything to do with what I think it means for Odyssey to be the title that really justifies the Switch existing and people purchasing it. Also, there's a different X factor because I think that, you know, Breath of the Wild, we have to remember, is built on Wii U hardware. It's incredibly impressive for that, but it's ultimately an upgraded Wii U game. And it's essentially, we know, the same as the Wii U title. And so it's not even a game that was built on the Switch hardware and built for the Switch to take all of the best advantages of the power, the graphics, the controls, and all of the other Switch features. I mean, as obviously shown by the Sheikah Slate, and we know that the Sheikah Slate was supposed to operate as the gamepad, but then, of course, all that went away, and Nintendo changed everything and made it a Switch title as well, and so they pulled that whole idea out. You can just tell even the mechanics within the game were saying, hey, this is a Wii U game, and you're going to love what the Wii U lets you do with this game. And so there's kind of that factor too. Like, just because I might end up enjoying Breath of the Wild more than Mario Odyssey, I could admit that it's really just a really fancy, dressed up Wii U game that I'm playing with Breath of the Wild. Whereas Odyssey, we know that game was designed and built from the ground up with the Switch in mind, using the Switch's hardware, you know, planning to use the Joy-Cons from the get-go. Whenever Nintendo finally internally created the Joy-Cons, whenever that happened, you know, a couple years ago, they were like, well, this is what we're going to do with our Mario game now. So that's another thing that makes it organically unique and connected to the Switch in a way that Breath of the Wild truly isn't. Now, the next Zelda game, obviously, you might be changing that if it turns out to release on the Switch and built for the Switch that way. Metroid Prime 4. Obviously, as a Metroid fan, I'm feeling like that has a pretty good chance to then become the new definitive title. But I think for right now, assuming Mario Odyssey is the amazing masterpiece we expect it to be, I think Odyssey really is the true quantifiable definitive game for the Switch. It's also really exciting when you think about the fact that Nintendo is one of the few companies with the Switch to have that console-defining definitive title within the first year of the console's life cycle. That doesn't really happen as often as we maybe think. I mean, Nintendo's done it a few times, launching the 64 with Mario 64 and the Wii with Twilight Princess, although, similar to Breath of the Wild, that was truly a GameCube game that was released on the Wii, but 10 years later, 12 years later, I still feel like it counts, so we're just gonna let that slide for now. They've done that a few times. I'm trying to think of any other... Okay, well, the Xbox launched with Halo, so that's a huge one. There's a couple of other examples. Maybe even some handhelds have done that in the past as well. But it doesn't happen really that often, you know, as far as launching. And then even if you think within the first year, I mean, Gears of War for the Xbox 360 was, I think, just under the 1-year mark for the 360. So you can kind of count that because at the time, Gears of War was that impactful and important. One of my favorite games of all time. But usually, PS4, I mean, I don't even know what the definitive title for the PS4 is, much as I love it. And I certainly know it wasn't in the first year. I mean, all it had was The Last of Us Remaster. I mean, I think The Last of Us is probably the console-defining title for the PS3. And that was in the last year before the next console even launched, when the PS4. So that's murky waters right there. So I think at the end of the day, looking at what Odyssey seems to be achieving, being the game it is, defining the console, taking advantage of the power in the controls, and launching within the first year of the console, it's like the most ultimate and incredible example of a definitive title. So yeah, there you go. I mean, obviously I'm just really excited to be talking about Mario. I'm really excited to be playing Mario. I'm taking one holiday day at the end of the week here to be able to have some extra time off to play Odyssey, and I'm very fortunate I can do that with my job. And it's going to be great. I have a short week. I have a 4-day week instead of a 5-day week, and I'm going to have a 3-day weekend to be able to just power through Odyssey and just get as much game time as I possibly can squeeze into that weekend. It'll still take me a couple months to beat the game, I'm sure, because I play slowly, a lot of times on purpose. But regardless, it's going to be great. I'm sure everyone's excited. Talk about Odyssey below. What do you think about my concepts here of it being the definitive title? Do you think that will hold true once the game comes out? Do you think Breath of the Wild does that? Or do you think it's going to be something later, whenever Metroid comes, or maybe it's the Pokemon game, or what have you, some surprise game next year? You guys talk about it below. Let's be pumped for Odyssey, just a couple of days away. And that's it for now. So thanks for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.